Second. Oh, the Sada Shiado. Tata the Troatelin called Shia Yains, Troatelin the Rinpoche get Troatelin the Pem as a kitchen was shoots and those. They in San Loman Nampake, the Mixar Tangane Chi Nyamling court, the Tawat and Chupa Nyamsling cups the Kanga Mashiwa Tendu unit and to a kitchen with the Turo. Nang the Tinitemato Tisuk and Dangamando Shirochi.
So Campbell would like to make one announcement about the questions and the answer session. So it is first. It is very. You can consider it really very important and very special to be able to ask questions to Rinpoche, and therefore I encourage you to please only ask questions that are related to the Dharma practice, that are related to the difficulties that you might encounter with understanding the view or the conduct or your Dharma practice or things like that. So anything that is very important to clear away these misunderstandings, please ask these kind of questions. But we unfortunately don't have the time to ask any other questions.
Generally, I don't know. Chocolate, that young me, quality, so Hako, the family team, a lot of Koto carry or in the team, can sugar Marie Kabaja, sugar Marie, Tina Tomba chocolate.
And so Rinpoche says, in general, of course, you can ask whatever you want, but for it to be meaningful, it is better to ask questions about practice, because this is what I know about. Because about all other mundane things, there's others who are much more skillful than I am. I don't actually know anything about these things. I don't even actually know how to make a phone call myself. So there's really no point in asking about these things.
In the Dayton, some other Hindu Chebi by years on Chebi by Jadana, Tabu Saba Chebi body, or simply Tamti Pamamazi by Chicken your marriage. Munitanete, Nipal, goes up with Dimbatamidri, Salotana, Kovatoma, Meba Lutang, Meba Lam, Pamata, Nindo, Pata, Chuma Mazi by Chicken your marriage, Samla. The tales of the son of Tova library. Tanchi or Dungy Yoris, not water such a Dungy the young Gonde, the Dungy the Gona, or Dungy Tita so around all the carriages. So around all of the Dungy Tunzi, the Yonayang, that Mazubi Dungy the Tavri, Katanka so be Doctor many pages of body. Yet to drop many pages of the tongue. Dear Trabo, Drolma, Quang Shedang, the Rang Songo is the big quarter. Certainly, Charlie Yorid. Quang Ranga Song, so many Timatis, Song, Tato Court in him, Tamjig, Dama Toko Yorid, Zopato Pine Butter, take a Dungi Colas on Lotane. Tea, Kanga Jung, the Shedang Jung, Shedang goes on winds of a chet, the doctor from Guillermo. Doctor Telly don't tell you the dark over Mary. Then now I bet all the charity. Panawa your pay out the bitty, Tonkari. Oh, the Horangi, Matadoro, by Chipak, Numo Barret. Numo, but the Dungi Jury, the Kawado, the social dog. Social Ranga Numo, going to be children. The pastor Charlie, your bitter, a taxi tangy money. Tell the paint about Jachel, Mangro. Don't put your pay your own conday. Oh, don't put it, don't know how to that's about it. Oh, don't put your pay your carry. Don't put jiggies, sandwich jiggies. Thomas Howells, 1 hour to grace. Yagamit or Yadiwati, tourism, Tapushing Ham, Cotton Ham grace. 동부들이 이게 철처럼 생도로 무슨 노아로 정말 샘틱바리에서 통하면 샘틱바리는 단지는 코라차리 이핑으로 사제차 락상 샘틱으로 저걸 맞으면 파열러진 전날 들이 저만만도 저와는 힘보매와 착해요. 저랑토로 꼬리는 뉴와 문제지 해당 문제에 제대로 접근했던 거요래. 종류에 해당 대리들 접근한 거요래. 독들이 인나티 요말에 그런데 배라 동해마도 요말에 데이터 사람들이 뉴모 방문진 거래.
So when we cultivate loving kindness and compassion, we cultivate we meditate on the four immeasurables. And first there is the immeasurable love. And so here you contemplate that there is not a single sentient being who has not been my parent in a past life. And from a conventional perspective, the conventional truth, this is how it really actually is. Because since beginningless time, I've taken on countless bodies, and in each of these lifetimes, I've had parents, family, friends, children, and so forth. And for this reason, because they're endless, there is not a single being who has not been like a family to me. And so if you think in this way, an actual feeling arises. And then you also see that they suffer. And then you think about the suffering of the 6 realms in samsara over and over again. And then imagine how would it be if I would have this kind of suffering. For example, even if we have just a little problem, the suffering is almost unbearable for us. So how would it be if we had that kind of suffering? So think in this way. Also, yesterday during the teachings, I mentioned this illustration, an example about the poisonous snake, and that came up later in one of the questions. So the person asking about the poisonous snake said that actually the poisonous snake has at least the power to protect itself. So it might seem that because it is very frightening, it has this power to protect itself. And even though that's how it seems, what it also does is it causes a feeling of aversion in others, and in this sense it also is negative. And and so then the reason why we actually mention the snake as an example is for us to use this example to investigate our own mind. So then since we say the snake is an embodiment of hatred, so then we should recognize here the affliction of hatred. So we are here not trying to figure out the many faults of a snake, but we are trying to find the hatred in our own mind. So we can, of course, give limitless examples if we try to look at faults and qualities of others. So we are not pointing out like that snakes are there's like a fault, something wrong with the snake, but actually is an example that helps us to find our own affliction in our own mind. So then when we think about the snake, we should think that, so I'm a person, and what makes me different to that snake actually? So what is the difference is the way we appear because of our affliction in the mind. And that affliction that caused this snake body is the cause of suffering. And where then is that affliction actually? And then we find that actually I have that affliction too. So we use the snake example in order to recognize our own afflictions. So that is important to recognize, because if we think that this is about the snake and we don't actually use this to investigate our own mind, then our questions will only increase, and we can elaborate more and more on all the various things that appear. Also another example of samsara and nirvana is a tree, a single tree. If we look at the many different branches and parts of the tree, then we become deluded, confused by all the different parts of the tree. So that is the delusion. We become carried away by all the details that we separate out, which are actually part of one. And so when we use the example of a tree, we are not pointing out diversity, but actually a single ground, that the mind has a single ground. Just like a tree, we can think that the lower part, like the roots and so of the tree, represent the 6 realms of samsara, and then the upper part of the tree, like the flowers and the leaves and so on, represent the higher realms, and especially the pure lands and the forms of the Buddhas and so forth. So when we think of the tree, then it should help us to see that all beings have a single ground of mind. And only because beings have given rise to self-grasping, they go down to samsara, and others who have cultivated altruism go up to enlightenment. So this is how we should take that example. And then a feeling arises within you. So it is important to take the example and gather it into and apply it into your own mind. Because if you project outward and think that it's about this outer object, then you try to discern and figure out this object that we're using as an example, like the snake, then questions will only increase, and these questions then become pointless questions, because all these are examples pointing still to a single thing to recognize, which is our own afflictive emotions. And so here we are using the snake as an example to do that. But then, of course, the snake really is also an embodiment of that, of hatred, for example, because the snake, a snake existence is really only an existence of great suffering. There is no nothing good about a snake incarnation. And by looking at that, it helps us to recognize our own afflictions.
Pena nyawala chadanga dunget nyawala kangli so o jo shedang le so shedang ka kari chigo ta te ne mchen dele yotni te ta dungi namala so ro yo tel ma che ta yang dungi per meti shedang de una de nang ma chabo me ba ra ko ta pamala so ba kaka ro de na so dungi sam je ma chaba yo le te ta bena do chale tena ta sosoke do yung ala chale chine ngomba me patata bena lo to kaba le sa pata me teden ga jibo donggu san je tamba je tamji de namnyam simbe ba me holon ni ko ko wa de do yung ga de wa le cha de de ba tabla de je je ko le de che de jibo da jibo de ma sa wi wa jibo dong to ko yo ma le लेका से तो खेली जो तो खाया माजी गाना जी दे जरा पेच बोले खासो खाला तो कोई दे ना युतनी दे तो कोई हमारे दे ता दुंगे दे बार थोवास ओ बेना दो चाले सो सेना ले दे ये दा तो नहीं कोई योले दनी छु चे बेना ले जिम दे मासी पातेला तमोक ला तरोग तो नहीं कोई योले तरोग जी वाली Teni mala yara, mete la min samte, la mi nyam de chega yore roa junga so, la mi kakala chega yore, tate matang la mi samte joa chimbu yore, o te mela donge chatsama yore, la tsenge donge loptuli yengni machekang la lejum de machine, sani cheba kamni teni langi, Dahina you mo bata nyam de Drolma tini yang kaba mang pola tini ni song so de go yore de ta ram potong to it 말라 지와 가와 나와 저와 저기 나지 동에 예를 들면 전phong 동에서 락과시를 제자를 이 동에지 요다 요기도 철거 말이 가리가 철거리든 삼미기 지도 다 철거리 삼미기도 있지나 근데 그네 지나 마상지로 들어놨다 오 마상들아 번홀로 두 포선 족반도 이제 동에 강한 무속상고 요리 제 말이지 말라리 변하고 요리 숙불의 요적이지 숙불의 독지 요 말이지 속송 것도 해 많이 냠지 돈이랑 그 봐 많이 냠이 야 페블 레와요 많이 냠지 또 봐요 내라서 배차 고모 레리가 작게 돼 나한테 나한테 제도 해야지 내가 월보는 원phong 것도 해 야, 매비 동해 지금 좋아라고 원phong 것도 해 야, 직장 매나 나오냐 봐 단지에서 말한다 단지 코랑들이 동해에서 정한 거 남지 제 차대에 우리 시들이 동네 매와 직장요 말이지 대상제 동네도 전 타토다 동네 생걸 남지래 생걸 남지는 때 강리지나 오 인핑이 로드 기나 이 동네지 밥지 로로리 샘티 동네 그 저세대 차로라고 차로요리 동네 같이 이제 세대 도도 시람 매와차 이 라글 롱아가 사와 탐제 노르 데라서 파트리 시람 매와차 가리는 논조고요리 에 차한테 데리시니지 다 동네 돌동안 담아서 그 바티 주고요리 뉴모바 촉티 동네 촉티 나반하도 하고 제스테리 동네 라파라 진이 소리 뉴모바 무슨 대 니보라 다 사촉 생비 사촉 생노나 오 진핑이 로니 그도 사촉 생고가 8%쪽 그바 8%쪽 같으니 어 진핑이 로스 요니 정도 코로 사와타지야 기와는 정도 저 촉이요래 사촉 생고요데 중용딩된 줄 알지 사촉 생고 내당 마시나 용딩 좋은 줄 알지 가부 기와서 제발도 더영 단지장 되나 내 데리지 내가 부터 맞아 사촉되어 토크요 말이 이제 세도 말이 사촉 생들을 기와 총총들 들나잖아 내가 털수고 내가 다 사촉 사기에 고막 토크요 제 골랐어 저 사촉 생고 이 골랐어 단지가 이봐라 요모가 독대라서 봤었네 이거서 저 사촉 생고 거기 그거 파신 쪽 근데 또 나사 좀 오늘 조소이나 네 대통령 요모 리니 볼래 이 사지가 송져봐 데레 대통령 리니 볼래 상호단 거라 내가 갖고는 땅을 망부터 사말이 찌그랑 정되는 단들과 가르치고 찌그랑도 주인비로 조금 정되나 인비로 상상 찌고래 인비로 니발게 피고 상로지는 룽아 이송거 사와 탐치 제와는 jel리 마체 진 니코라 제가 수남마도 타고 돼 니코라 수남 타고 요래 세고 줄을 사죠 세워나 디저 비용 싸네 디저 수남시 바카레리 수남시가 니와 타고 요래 이 다다음에 빼는 거 수남시 바디 며칠이 기보 말이 야 산이 산게 저거 봐 마토 빠데 디 단지 맞이 봐도 다 기와처럼 로아를 도는 콜로는 좀 콜와든 콜로리 기와 쪽에 그런 소리 좀나 대서 랩고요리 야 단지의 뉴모빌레 망해서 하는 이 성성의 유르드제 지는 체는 휴지 또 전로리 전리를 저 받아들이 배나 사신 도대라서 보지 않던데 내가요 은희 롱당을 왼쪽고요리 밑바닥 쪽에 걸어가니 상로다나 시라로 체인도 그래 시랍 체도 당보통에 망도 와나서 용리 대지지 탑들 뛰나 대지 시랍 탑들이 시랍을 이나 오 이들이 매파도 탑 랑그 등에 매파다니 마치 이는 핀서 탑들 시랍 전에 저쪽고요리 제대로 탑라는 매파데 대라지리 라나 매파사 쳐 라나 매파데는 통 주진을 열려대 봐 사첩지 강리 오 산촉 스바는 토바양 매지 지라도 바라서 오 주산촉도 통그 산촉도 통대요 가리 그냥 토 말이야 직접 토 말이야 야 마토바양 지면 뭐지 셈지 뭐지 라지 이는 찌와요라 랑은 찌와요 봐 이는 찌와요 봐 저거 내 토요래 대회를 드니 무슨 산촉도 만나 토바양 매지 마토바양 매지잖아 다리는 기와 체력 당시를 때는 내가 돌이다 다토고 상지해지 봐지 그래서 상지라 단지다 진짜 상내 인피로 나파를 냐면 생긴데 그 제서 봐 그래서 사죠 선 대지는 지금이 동당은에 지나 동당 그 사죠 정말 이서좀 시바 탐지 상내 이서 매배시지 지금 가사 펜션이나 오마니가 류이리 봐도 세위 직접 말해야 돼. 대 치발 요바가 레다 유몽 타대야 돼. 레다 유몽 받는데 야래. 동당 산청서 하고서는 군접 시바가니. 야, 군접 준비해서 하면 봐시. 저 레메게 왔잖아. 나 사지 좀 뛴데는 제마 속들로 이유를 해. 야, 동당 원군이 동반이 저 뉴모가 대가랑 시랍라 되네 시랍다 뉴지라 되네 또바도 또고요래 대도도 저 동반이 선 내가 동반이 차요 고요래 대자비 용지 제발기 탑 제발기 그래 나 사지 거기 람 제발기 무슨 양서 랑을 대다 용지지 들이 시랍 매나 하고 저고요 말에 대처 먹고 요래 대회는 들이 라나 매고 공방지 통주들에게 열려져봐 이메일들이 나를 매고 산책듯이 요래지
So when we think about the suffering of the 6 realms in samsara, we can have as an approximate understanding of their suffering, of the general suffering. So whenever you have time, you can read about that in the books, where each of those types of suffering is explained, and then you go through that, and you think about each of these forms of suffering, and then also what is the cause of that particular kind of suffering. For example, when you learn about the hell realm, there's the suffering of heat and cold. So where does that come from? What is the cause? The cause of that is a mind of hatred. And why is that? What does hatred do? We can see even in this life, hatred is the cause of so much suffering, even in this life. Even now, when we are very angry, it creates a lot of suffering. It tears apart families and friends, children with their parents, and so on. Even in this life, it creates unbearable suffering. So that is the fault of hatred, of anger. And then you come, for example, to the next one of attachment. The attachment to the 5 sense pleasures. We think, for example, if I just would be rich, if I just would have all these enjoyments, or if I had this house, and so on, then I would be happy. And we think that I want to just enjoy this life, enjoy myself in this life. I want to be happy in this life. And then we become attached to those things that we think make this life happy. And then day and night, our entire life, like a wheel always turning, we pursue these objects of our attachment, any of the 5 sense pleasures, thinking that they will make us happy in this life. And actually, they cannot actually make us happy in this life. Actually, for one, the pursuit of these forms of happiness also requires us to work hard for them, and so we work all the time, and that is actually suffering in itself already, the pursuit. For example, if you would just be like me, for example, I'm not pursuing anything, not doing much. I feel I'm always very happy, and wherever I go, I get some food to eat. You have a very happy life like that, actually. But then people can't just stay like that. They want to pursue those things that they think will make them happy. And so then one affliction develops into the next. Then because we are attached, attachment then develops into greed. And that will lead to birth as a hungry spirit. And then there is the affliction of ignorance, and that is not to know the fault of our afflictions, not to understand karma, and that leads to birth as an animal, the suffering of the animals. And then we have the higher realms of the humans, the gods and the demigods. Sometimes the gods and demigods are considered as one, sometimes separate. But these three, the gods, humans, and demigods, are very related to each other because they experience more abundance. Like the long-lived gods, they experience enjoyment, some pleasure for their entire life for a long time, and they are distracted by their blissful experiences, and their entire life they are not interested in the Dharma, they don't think about karma. And however, then when the time of dying comes, they experience the suffering of change and falling to the lower realms, because there still is self-grasping and there still is affliction in the mind. So then again, it will lead to birth for a long time in the three lower realms. And then there is the suffering of the humans, such as in a coarse way now, there's much more suffering, but in brief, there is the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And for the most part, in this happy existence of gods and so forth, we do not have much awareness of suffering. We don't really notice, we don't feel suffering. Those who are compassionate, they have an awareness of suffering, they feel suffering. For example, sometimes we think that when there is abundance, there is no suffering. We might see a family that is very rich, that has a perfect family, and they have money and all the wealth and possessions, and we think that they don't have any problems, they don't suffer. But that is not true at all. Milarepa had said the rich suffer from their possessions, and in fact he said that there is nothing worse than being rich. There's even more suffering, because the rich, first of all, they need to accumulate their riches, and then they need to protect their riches, and then as they protect their riches, they're always afraid that they will lose their riches, that it will again decline. And then also they try to increase their riches even more. And because they try to do that, they do not even want to give away like a single dollar. That already is great suffering. They have a grasping at that. So that is great suffering. And then also, he said, Milarepa said, and then the poor suffer from their lack of possession. And then they suffer because they cannot sustain their life. So even if you're, even if there is neither of both, even if you're not poor or rich, if there is just self-grasping, if there's just this idea of I, once that is there, there is bound to be suffering, because that is the nature of it. The nature of self-grasping is suffering, is fear. That is what it is. Self-grasping is fear and suffering. And therefore, there is nowhere in this world where there is no because there is a grasping at a self. So ultimately, this suffering, all the suffering that we see, has its root within the mind. So it is a suffering that comes from the mind. And therefore, if in our mind we cultivate altruism, we turn our mind away and we forget about the suffering. If you think about the problem, the mind becomes like ice. The more you think about it, the more the mind solidifies, and the more you lose your wisdom. And if you lose your wisdom, you will make many mistakes in your activities of body and speech. And then in the end, you build suffering upon suffering, and sometimes people even take their own life. So the 6 afflictive emotions are the causes of the 6 types of suffering, and that is suffering explained in a very coarse sense, so that we can recognize the affliction. So first we recognize the affliction, and then the antidote to destroy it is bodhicitta, the altruistic mind. If you cultivate the conventional bodhicitta, then all your actions become the 6 paramitas. Even if you engage in normal, ordinary samsaric activity, if you have an altruistic mind, all these activities become virtues. So that is the quality of bodhicitta. It transforms all the faults into good qualities. And likewise, if you lack bodhicitta, then you will even transform good qualities into faults. So, for example, if you are selfish, even if you do something virtuous, because there is self-grasping, it will maybe have a temporary result, but no ultimate result. Because it will be, the cause of that will be exhausted, it will come to an end. But if you cultivate bodhicitta, then even the smallest virtue will first lead to the continuous birth in the higher realms and ultimately enlightenment. So think about the causes and what they lead to. The cause of bodhicitta, and then think about the cause of self-grasping and the afflictions. If you cultivate bodhicitta, your actions will become the 6 paramitas on the conventional level. And on the ultimate level, your actions will become the practice of the 7 limbs of accumulating merit and purifying obscurations. And so each of those 7 limbs, or the 6 paramitas, is actually an antidote to each of the 6 afflictive emotions. And when we try to apply an antidote for each affliction, it seems to be a difficult task. There's many afflictions. There seems to be so much, and people also ask, there is so much to practice. I'm getting confused. What is one thing? People ask for one thing that they can focus on to practice, and that one thing is the altruistic mind. If you just have an altruistic mind that wishes to benefit others, then whatever else you do will become virtues. And not only that, even if you do nothing, even if you sleep, merit still increases because you have bodhicitta in your heart. So think about the benefits of bodhicitta and the merit that comes from that. Why do we want to accumulate merit? It is because we want to experience happiness. And merit we do not only need for this lifetime, but in fact we need it until we attain enlightenment. Until self-grasping comes to an end, we need the merit. So in all our future lifetimes, as we continue to wander in samsara like a turning wheel, even the slightest happiness that we experience comes from a virtuous action. So that will lead to even the slightest happiness in the higher realms. But then, for the most part, our minds are afflicted and we grasp at a self, and therefore, for the longest time, we are born in the 3 lower realms, like the animals and so on. And then there is birth where, for example, we are born in a rock or in a wood, and so on. And this is a very long lifespan of suffering. So think about all of that. And if you think about that, gradually wisdom will increase. And as wisdom increases, your awareness increases. And then at first it might seem that suffering becomes more and more. But actually it is just that wisdom increases. And so then once wisdom has increased, you must then also apply the method to overcome suffering. There is a method to overcome suffering, not only for oneself, but also for others. And that is it is called the unsurpassed method to attain enlightenment. It is called unsurpassed because it is beyond any object of sight or even thought. It is inconceivable. In the Heart Sutra, in the Perfection of Wisdom, it says, the bodhisattvas have nothing to obtain. So if you ask a bodhisattva, so what do you bodhisattvas obtain? What do you get? There's nothing that we get, nothing we obtain. But then it says, the bodhisattva, it is also that it is not that bodhisattvas attain nothing. So what they actually attain is their own happiness and also great love for others. And if you only have that, you will always be happy. So the bodhisattvas obtain nothing, but also it is not that they obtain nothing. And what they obtain is the happiness, first temporarily in the 3 higher realms in all lifetimes, and ultimately enlightenment. And enlightenment is the state that has cleared away all selfish states of mind. Self-grasping is cleared away, and an altruistic mind expands like space for all sentient beings. So that love for all beings is the conventional bodhicitta. And then the ultimate bodhicitta is that when through this love then all dualistic perception is cleared away, and then you realize the wisdom of non-duality. You attain this wisdom of non-duality. And what this wisdom realizes is that even though we appear separately in different forms and shapes, our mind has a single ground. The difference only lies temporarily in our particular karmas and afflictions, but these can be subdued, they can be cleared away. So that is the meaning of the ultimate bodhicitta. And we realize that on the basis of the conventional bodhicitta. First, we understand the infallibility of karma, cause and effect. We understand that certain actions lead to that certain result, as the Buddha had explained. And the words of the Buddha are valid or authentic. And then ultimately, however, the Buddha said things are empty. And in that sense, the conventional is related to the ultimate, because when from the conventional level the cause of affliction arises, but if it arises within wisdom and compassion, then that cause can become empty. And then when the cause is empty, then also the result is empty. So that is the special quality of following the path of the Buddha. If you practice that path, these kind of qualities will arise. Only if you lack the wisdom awareness, then it is hard to understand, and then there are many doubts that will arise. But ultimately, if we follow the authentic path, we will attain the state of unsurpassed enlightenment. And so again, unsurpassed, because this state is so inconceivable, it is beyond any words or thoughts.
Roma Pedro Garchen, Socha in the guards at the Artudion, Tira Gaio, Pedro told you about something, Tira Gawa and Gisino, Pusum to what I will Gisino, said the Yid they are told Ranagachi, I think God say me, but the way you listen of the Neluxipe, Dong Danguni, you listen for Madrapa. Sajok Security Security of the 상기의 사람 거야 요봐 상자야 요봐 대신이요 같이 뭐 대 상기의 사람 고발들 소소 되는 배우지나 상기에서 돕서는 되는 나빠 상기배 라그 대바도 상기 상기 능지도 준이 동담바 대바도 준이 동담고는 상기 생기 이제지 봐 상기 상기 잡소 전부 다왜 봐 생기 상기 처럼 다왜 봐 내가 대답을 해네 오 이제는 생기서 줘야 동선이 등에 체매 가지고 생 땅무가 이 동담도 시송 이 생로로 자오 생기 상기 줘야 도 대시 바감들이 생기 상기를 핑고잖아 가리 핑고고 제와가 핑고고 제와가 소소 제와 대답을 돕니까 매내양 대리지고 돕도 대리지고 또 뭘로 싸우는 거 뒤성도 시고 사지 장거 많이 오고 진 투고 말이 사지 좀 되게 타바치는 도는 송리 초 강가 좀 세마가 체라 양 좀 체적요래 조가가 찍가 세마이래 조가가 쪄이 세마이 조가가 짜이 세마이 이제 제마가 장가 사지 대선 송리 대답지기 상기부 동가리 삼제지 사예요래 오늘 삼제는 동야마도 주랑 삼제리 주랑 삼제 초거도 해 가리 초거도 야 저는 하죠 제가 지금 뭐지구나 이다 얘는 가나요는 제 진축 초라 가리도 대는 하지는 베지 보도 강에 요버가를 대다오들 저랑 가봐서 땅을 먹지 용도로 대다가 줄 초월했거든 다 삼진 통야매요 삼진은 바지다고 요래지 대도 사진 삼진 신진 탐지를 대다고 요래지 지랑 멋직다 조지 말라 대다고 삼진은 바지다고 요나 유습지 사진 탐지게 공바지 양직 내버 사진 남지 송 내버 사진 탐지 sep기도 쏘고 요래지 마음 남자 송발지로 마음 밖에 산초서 쏘고 요래지 다들 요구하는 남자 쏘고 대송세 강리 도산이 잡아 탐지지 봐 사진 무슨으로 왔어 뛰어 대쏘고 요래지 마산에 가서 왔다가 딱 가봐야 미실 멋진 산초서 하고 요래 배제서 타망을 쏘더니 짬도 받을 수 있는 정도 미치게 나와 사진을 보고 만난 관을 양배 생기도 대화다 디스 대화다 대위도 대버지도 락이오래 sem지 킹이오라 대답은 봐도 사진 대말 보지지 모르쇼나 대답은 봐요래 다크삼부터 대진식부터 추진지도 됐으면 되니 이런 sem지도 줘야도 같이 모이는 거예요 내가 버들이 sem지리 동의를 줘나 차도 자님이와 sem지 수입 내가 벌써 저거를 지세랑 저거를 지세랑 되거든요 이제 가와 대화 탐지 기세랑 지소나 소소고 톰네 이런 소소를 다 다니라는 거 세로 가와다 대화 들이 마음보 기와 세력 탐지를 내가 어떤 도리성을 대화 다tuk 사지의 공방 다tuk 사지의 공방식 같아요 다다 사족 센데 삼위기 기와 치리치리치리는 돈을 되게 도리성 대화 토복하면 머리톱 휠런체 드니데 지절 매르매 사족선이 치리치는 도요는 다족 사족선데 도도사 건조 사족선 이렇게 주 나디지 시에 처럼도 쇼니 잡초로 탐바다 자꾸 이거래 상기들 직접 매와 자꾸 이거래 말이 상기는 동반이들이 잠초 전부 매와 말이야 잠초 요와라 오늘 잠초 철은 이요 말이 타부 강성을 잠초 쳤다 맞지도 그걸 넣나 최적마도 매화리 이제 장소 제일 가리키고 요리잖아 다 장소를 내가 나과를 대다 잡아 사오고 철롱 나서 봐 탐지 최된 거 어디가 대다가 사지를 틀래 동항하랑 대다랑 이게 중앙탑지 대다가 이제 요리 대다가 사지가 용진이 적가 세지다 줘야도 적가 다 되어 속을 접하고도 가슴 가와 체매 바지 이제 당형 체매 바지는 다쪽 동물들이 사지생기 동양발에서 하고 요래지 당형 체매 바서 체매 바지도 줄이지나 내가 생기는 인지 침부 좀도 침부 다쪽들이 생기 답지 사지 토야 요들이 가와치보들이 들이제야 요래 들들 체미 봐 예서.
And so then, once you have then cultivated the boundless love and boundless compassion for all, then also a boundless joy arises. And that is to think that it would be how nice would it be if all sentient beings would be happy and joyful. So you have a wish for all beings to be happy. So first you see their suffering and you feel compassion. And when you see that they actually experience happiness, you rejoice in that. So that is a boundless joy. And and then especially with those, when you think about those that are around you, like those who are close to you, like your friends and your family and other disciples, or even just a small little creature, an animal, when you see that they all experience even the smallest happiness, you will rejoice in that. It will make you feel happy that they have this happiness. For example, when two friends get along, are harmonious with each other, then you rejoice in that. You're happy about that. So in brief, it is when others are happy, it will make you happy. That is the boundless joy. And so ultimately then, based on understanding the nature of mind of all sentient beings, on the ultimate level, you also understand that sentient beings do not really exist. So when you cultivate true bodhicitta and you understand the nature of mind, because sentient beings do not really exist, you know that sentient beings can actually be established in enlightenment. They can attain enlightenment. So then you will make an effort because you know that they can be established in enlightenment. And that is accomplished by virtue of three powers. They can be established in enlightenment due to three powers. First, there is the power of your own faith, the power of your own compassion, and then there is the power of the great compassion of all the Buddhas, and then there is the power of Dharmata, that is emptiness. And here you understand that beings can be liberated because Buddhas and sentient beings have a single ground. Ultimately, they are one. It is just like ice and an ocean water. The Buddhas are the ocean and sentient beings are like ice blocks. So you know that sentient beings, because that is their nature, can become liberated. And knowing that will release your mind. You will feel at ease in your mind because you know that beings can be liberated. So then you have a wish to liberate them, to benefit them. And what will benefit them? It is love that will benefit them. And even though you might find that my own love is not so powerful, the mind of the Buddhas, the love of the Buddhas is very powerful. So that is the power of all the Buddhas combined. So there are countless Buddhas that have appeared in the three times, incalculable. We cannot grasp the number of Buddhas that have appeared. It is said in the Great Liberation Sutra, for example, countless emanations have appeared, incalculable. Even though you could count the sand grains on the river Ganges, the Buddhas cannot be counted. So you can count the sand grains from one, you can count 10, 100, and so on. But even more Buddhas have appeared. So what that is to show is that all the Buddhas countless Buddhas have appeared, and even though they are limitless, they have taught one thing, and that is love and compassion. So love and compassion may seem abstract because we cannot see it. But then, can you feel it? How can you feel love? Think about somebody that you love, even if they're very far away. When you think about them, how do you feel? You feel happy. Or when you're sad and somebody who you love calls you on the phone, you might even cry. Why? Because you love them. So that is something you cannot see it, but it is still very powerful, clearly. It creates these powerful feelings. And that feeling of love is a feeling that the Buddha has for all sentient beings. And now imagine how powerful that is. If you think about the power of your own love, that is very limited. Even if it's just limited to one person or a few people, already it is so powerful. Then imagine the power of the love of all the Buddhas of the 3 times that are incalculable. So that love is very powerful. And that is what all the Buddhas that have appeared in the past have taught. They have appeared in order to benefit sentient beings. And this is also the point from which the future Buddhas will arise. They will arise from bodhicitta. And also the present Buddhas are just that. For example, His Holiness Dalai Lama is a true emanation of a Buddha. They love all sentient beings. And so if we only think about our limited love, for example, the powerful feeling that is generated when somebody who we love calls us on the phone. So in this way you can understand the power of bodhicitta. And when we take refuge, for example, and then we pray, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, what we are saying actually is that power. We are talking here about the power of love. May all beings have love, and may they enter the path of the Buddha's teachings, because it has that power. So through these 3 types of power, the power of your own faith and the power of all the Buddha's compassion and the power of dharmata, all sentient beings can be liberated. And knowing that, you should rejoice. You feel great joy. And so temporarily, until that is achieved, you feel joy when sentient beings are free from any kind of problem or suffering. You are free from any form of jealousy. And whenever you see anyone experience happiness, you rejoice. That is a boundless joy. So the happiness of others is your own greatest joy. And if you rejoice in the happiness of others, then you will obtain the same merit as they do. And that will lead to the birth in the higher realms in all future lives, until attaining enlightenment. And even now in this life, it will bring you only happiness. So gradually our bodhicitta increases from lifetime to lifetime as we wander through the 3 higher realms. We are again born as humans, and then we again encounter the Dharma, and slowly as we continue on the path, our bodhicitta increases more and more. And as bodhicitta increases, self-grasping diminishes, and eventually the eyes will merge to be one with the ocean, and we attain enlightenment. And so sometimes people think that when we attain enlightenment, then we have disappeared, just turned into emptiness. But it is not like that. It is just like merging with the ocean. When you merge with the ocean is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It is just that you cannot divide it. There is no 2 in the ocean. If you pick up a drop of water from the ocean, it has the same nature as any other ocean water. And any other water in the world has the same essence. It performs its water-like functions. Like you have the clouds, and you have the rain, and the steam, and the different things that are done with water, that water does. And that is the enlightened activity of the Buddhas. The 5 elements just naturally appear. So if you understand this quality, then you know that sentient beings can actually become liberated. They can be established in happiness. And when they do, then you rejoice, and that is boundless rejoicing. So that is the boundless love, compassion, and joy. And then there's also the boundless equanimity. And that is to understand that single ground, that all beings and all Buddhas are the same on that single ground. And therefore your compassion, your love, your joy pervades them all. And that becomes great compassion that encompasses all sentient beings. So if you know that, you will have a wish to cultivate that, to cultivate great compassion for all beings. So that is, if you know that, based on the single ground, if you know that sentient beings can be enlightened, then you will be inspired to also accomplish that and cultivate great compassion for them. So that is the practice of the four immeasurables.
Rinpoche Maji Bana Ji Jurji Jiba Nyamba Me Barya Kong Le Kong De Bewa Yo Akbar Sangha Thank you. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani